Welcome, sentient beings. I'm Shamika.
And I'm Jess, and we are Sci-Fi in Real Life.
This is the show where we take you all through strange worlds and even stranger truths by linking iconic scenes from science fiction to contemporary technology issues.
And this particular episode is no different, except that it is.
It's a little different. That's right. In this special short, we're commemorating Black History Month by watching an episode of Black Mirror entitled Black Museum.
And I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black, and I'm black, y'all.
And the thing that's different about this episode is that I have not yet seen it. Well, the episode of Black Mirror, that is.
Yes, and if you haven't seen it either, go watch it, because spoilers. Yes. So, we're referring to Black Mirror Season 4, Episode 6, which premiered on Friday, December 29th, in 2017. The episode stars Letitia Wright as Nish, who would go on to star as Shuri in the Black Panther movie on Friday, February 16th, 2018. Douglas Hodge plays Rollo Haynes. Now, I'm going to give you a setup. Okay, so this woman is driving in the desert. She stops to charge up her car. She sees this Rollo Haynes Black Museum. She goes in, checks it out. This guy comes up and he's like, I'm gonna give you a tour because you're the only person here. And so he tours around this museum of criminal artifacts. And it actually is several callbacks to other episodes of Black Mirror. There's 3 different stories. The first story is about a doctor who gets this transplant that helps him feel what patients are feeling so he can diagnose them. But something happens after a patient dies and he gets that adrenaline that turns into pleasure. So then he's really into his job.
Whoa.
But then that's not enough. So then he has to go out and find the pleasure for himself. I'm not going to spoil that part for you. That's pretty crazy. So the second story is a couple where the woman is in a coma, and the point of this is that the guy who's giving the tour used to work in this hospital building, and he worked on the 10th floor in research and development. So he was giving these, he gave the doctor the implant. This couple, the woman is in a coma, he gives them the opportunity to transfer her consciousness inside of the husband, or inside of the male partner.
Oh.
So she's sitting in his head, which works for a while because she's been in a coma for several years. So she's able to see and feel her son as he hugs her.
What happens to him? So he's still in there too?
He's still in there too. She's like sitting in a chair in his head.
Whoa.
Yeah. So guess how well that goes after a couple weeks?
Probably not.
Probably not. No, you were correct. So then they have to come up with another solution because he starts dating someone else. And the person he's dating is like, you need to get it together. Like, she's talking to him, but she's really talking to her, kind of thing. So they transfer her consciousness into a toy for their son. It's like, when you hug it, mommy can... But now she has these 2 buttons, a happy face and a sad face on the chair. So she can express herself either as, mommy loves you, or mommy needs a hug.
Is this like a doll by any chance?
It's not a doll, it's a monkey.
Oh, thank God. Okay, I was gonna be
Dolls
real
are
creeped
creepy
out. I
anyway.
hate that. I hate
Yeah, dolls are very creepy. I had stuffed animals as a kid because of that. 'Cause after that Cabbage Patch doll that I had when I was 2, couldn't take it. So that story essentially ends with her being trapped in this doll, and he says that after the United Nations declared that conscious beings that are transferred into inanimate objects have to have at least 5 expressions, this doll became illegal, but it was also illegal to terminate her.
Oh.
So there she remains inside that doll with just those 2 options.
And they couldn't give her more options? Like,
You would think they'd be able to upgrade
they can
it.
put a person into a doll, but they can't give her more faces? What kind of future is this?
A lazy one? I don't know. That's a good point.
Very convenient.
Oh yeah. So that's all happening, and then he's like, but we haven't even gotten to the main attraction. So they go to the back, and there's a gentleman. So in all these the 2 stories before, people are watching the news in the background, and this weather woman is killed. In the first one, in the doctor story. Mm-hmm. In the second one, with the kid and the family, they've captured the murderer of this weather woman, and it's this black guy. So in the third story, you hear that this gentleman, Rollo, goes to this black guy, and he's like, "You're on death row. Everybody thinks you did it. I can help you. you can be the first in this experiment of transferring your consciousness. And if things don't go your way, your family will make money off of whatever proceeds there are. Doesn't say how they get the proceeds. He's like, but you're in technology, you can get me off because I didn't do it. He's like, yes, just sign this dotted line. Cut scene to him being executed. And he puts this thing on his head, which is also referred to in other Black Mirror episodes, takes his consciousness, and he wakes up as a hologram in a cell. And so what he did was he sold tickets to people so that they can execute him over and over and over again and get a little souvenir with him in pain that's like a hologram, like trapped. And it's not a souvenir that's just a picture of it. It's a copy of his consciousness inside the souvenir, experiencing that pain forever. That face. Yeah. Yeah.
What?
So, yeah. So as Rollo is telling a story, earlier he was complaining about the AC not working. So Nish gives him a little bit of water and he starts choking. So this story of the AC going out and then he asks for water, and the second story, and the third story he's starting to like, you know, this kind of thing.
Okay.
And Nish was like, well, didn't they have that whole documentary about how he didn't do it and there was no DNA evidence and this, that, and the third? And he's like, oh, fake news. His family abandoned him after he was convicted, da-da-da-da-da. And then he really starts choking. She's like, sit down if it'll make it easier. And he's like, what? So she grabs a chair and makes him sit down. And then she goes on a speech. Turns out, this is the biggest spoiler, y'all. Please watch this show before I say this.
Gosh, I'm scared.
The biggest spoiler is, she's his daughter. She poisoned Rollo so that she could put his consciousness inside her dad's consciousness and pull the trigger and go past the 10 seconds that is the max for safety and eradicate both of them so that her father can rest and so that she gets revenge on Rollo.
Oh my god! That's crazy!
And that's not even the last twist.
Okay.
So she leaves with the monkey, because she takes the monkey with her. And she gets in her car, which is all charged up, and she's like, and so her mom had apparently went to go visit him in this museum, and she sees what he had done to her husband, and she couldn't take it. She goes home and swallows a bunch of pills and alcohol and kills herself. And her daughter finds her. And so at the end, when Nish gets into her car, she's like, how did I do, Mom? And her mom's sitting in her head on a chair.
Oh my gosh, she did it! Whoa! Okay, that was a trip and a half. Awesome. Now I need to go watch this episode.
You really do. You really do. Yeah.
Wow.
So,
okay, that was a journey.
so here we're going to get into the episode. I have a couple hot takes.
All right.
Rollo Haynes says, never trust a guy in tech when he's talking about how the AC is on the fritz. But he doesn't expect anything from a young lady. Like, people assume that people in tech are always men. But here, and in Black Panther, Letitia Wright's character is a hacker. She's really good with technology because she hacked into the digital AC system, and she also was able to figure out how to transfer consciousnesses. So, underestimating women in tech, not a good thing to do. Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. Now, Dr. Peter Dawson, who's in the first story, he's experimented on like Nish's father, but he, after killing a man to get his final high, is put into a hospital and not taken to jail. In fact, Nish says, tell me they put him in jail, and Haynes says, the hospital. He ends up in a vegetative state, always experiencing that final orgasmic high after killing a homeless man, to transfer that pain into his pleasure. So of course Dr. Peter Dawson was white, just for the record. Of course. So this is where I insert the book club that goes along with this this YouTube series. You need to read Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow. I'm just gonna gift that to you right now. And that is the topic that we don't have time to go into this short, unfortunately, is incarceration, the prison system, the prison industrial complex that is subtly discussed in this Black Mirror episode. The other hot take that I have is that Clayton says he didn't do the crime and was looking for DNA evidence to clear his name. So her father, the one who was charged with this crime of the weather woman, thought that Rollo Haynes was going to help him with the DNA evidence. That never happened. He just took advantage of him. And we'll get into that more in a minute about Black people being taken advantage by the medical community. That's our first ethical dilemma. But more hot takes. So within Nisha's speech, which is a really interesting speech, she talks about how the protesters against her father being in this museum, the protesters got bored, followed the next viral miscarriage of justice you could hang a hashtag off of. So she subtly digs the armchair activism, I guess, of the digital age, which I thought was really interesting, especially as I'm wearing a Black Lives Matter hashtag shirt. So there are a lot of people who got involved with the Black Lives Matter movement initially online, but there are also a lot of people who walked in the streets and protested during the time of, especially back in 2013, 2014, when we had Ferguson, we had Eric Garner. I was in New York when Eric Garner happened. I was out in the streets also marching for Black Minds Matter with Columbia University students when I was in seminary at Union Theological. So yeah, I feel like her critique is very real, but at the same time, there are people who take these things offline and onto the streets.
Yeah.
Now, a fun fact about this episode. The first story about the doctor was a short story written by a famous magician. The short story is called The Pain Addict. It was written by PENN JILLETTE in the 1980s.
I was gonna say Houdini or something. That's way too obvious.
That would have been good, though. That would have been good. So let's dive into our ethical dilemmas. The first one I've already alluded to: Black people and the medical experimentation within the medical community. So this issue goes back further than what you're probably thinking of, which is, what's the first thing you think of when you think of Black people and the medical community experimentation?
I don't know. What should be the first thing that I think of?
Tuskegee.
That was not the first thing. I don't actually even know what that is.
So the Tuskegee experiments occurred on Black men in Alabama who were given syphilis at a time when there was a cure for syphilis, so they could see what the symptoms were as it evolved. So those are the Tuskegee experiments, which many people think of as, oh, that was terrible, that was horrible. It's a good thing we don't do that anymore, and that was a dark time in medical history. But that wasn't the only time. So I'm going to talk about Henrietta Lacks. Do you know who this is?
No.
Okay, so if you haven't heard of Henrietta Lacks, this is a woman who was she had cervical cancer, and in 1951, I believe, she went to a doctor to get a biopsy. The doctor took the biopsy and noticed that her cells kept regenerating after they left her body. So he sent them to a couple different labs all over the world, and they kept growing even in those labs. So what they did was they named the cells HeLa, capital H, lowercase e, capital L, lowercase a, and proceeded to make all kinds of discoveries, but also all kinds of money off of those cells. Henrietta Lacks' family did not find out about this until the 1970s.
Did they eventually get paid back for it? Did they get any compensation? I'm guessing no.
No. They do have some control over, for example, Henrietta Lacks' cells were some of the first ones to get like DNA sequencing or something like that. And in those papers that were published, her granddaughters and her either granddaughter or great-granddaughter was like, I don't think it's a good idea to have public information about my DNA out in the world. You know, so they have some say about like the publication of the sequencing and the information. Like, I don't have the science behind it. My science is not tight on this, but I know that that was a situation that her family was able to have some say in after the fact. But there's a film with Oprah Winfrey. It's a lovely little film on HBO about Henrietta Lacks's family, and the author Rebecca Skloot, who wrote this book and who also helped inform the family in it was the early 2000s, I think, about more information, backstory on Henrietta. So what's interesting to me is, as I said, people think of like Tuskegee, for example, or even Henrietta Lacks happening in this dark moment in time in history. But as these things go, you can go back. You can go way back. So, gynecology. In the time of slavery, there is J. Marion Sims, who used enslaved black women to perfect a gynecological treatment before introducing it to white women. These were black women who their bodies were exposed, their genitals were exposed. They'd have this guy come in and show other people, oh, here's the procedure. He was testing it on them, so it wasn't perfected. He's using all these kinds of tools, not telling them, of course, what's going on. No bedside manner. And there were also experiments done on dead bodies of slaves, even though it was religiously thought that defiling dead bodies was wrong, which I still believe is correct. So it's also interesting that this is a Times article that I found, and there was a quote in it by Washington. I got to get her first name. Washington says that there was a widespread belief that people who did not pay for their medical care would, quote, owe their bodies to the medical community in return. As a result, patients from marginalized communities like the poor and immigrants did not receive the same ethical consideration that others did. Though that idea would have applied to poor patients of all races, segregation at the time meant that black patients were confined in many places to black wards, and they were disproportionately affected. The other thing that Washington said, there's a big misconception about Henrietta Lacks's story. So people say it was a convention of the time that permission was not acquired or consent was not acquired from people in the 1950s. So that's even on the Wikipedia page if you read Henrietta Lacks's story. So it sort of brushes aside the behavior of this doctor that took Henrietta Lacks's cells. So Washington says what happened to Lacks would have been just the common practice at the time, but in reality, she found that while it's true that the laws and regulations that govern such experimentation have changed between then and now, basic ethical concepts such as informed consent were already very much in place. In fact, she says, especially in the wake of the world learning of the Nazi medical experimentation, some organizations kept consent rules that were even more stringent than those in place today. These conventions tended to be rigorously adhered to when it came to white people.
Wait, what year did that happen with Henrietta Lacks?
1951.
So that was after the war.
Yes.
Wow, that's even more shocking, because I remember like reading things now about how after the experiments that happened at the concentration camps, everybody was like freaking out, reasonably so, and making sure that like that's the reason why the IRB.
I was just thinking about that training that I took for IRB.
Yeah, we had to get trained for research to make sure that we don't do anything. Like now we have to be super careful about any kind of research with humans, and like this was after that. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, so it does touch on it a bit, just a little bit in the Black Museum episode, but it's worth noting that Black people have had this kind of history, and it's pervasive throughout medicine. I just gave one example in gynecology. There's a really great book that's quoted in the Times article, we'll link it in the description below, that goes through this medical history that the Black community has had. Black community, also Native Americans, like all these communities, there's like, I forget what the term is, but when you basically take women, you have them come in and you make them infertile without telling them, so that you can reduce their populations in the society, like that happened as well. So like this is a long-standing history, and when people are mistrusting of the medical community today, it's like, well, can you blame them? Yeah, it's Yeah. So I think that Black Museum does a good job of like just presenting this in a really subtle way, but also really specific way. And I just wanted to highlight that as one of our ethical dilemmas. The other one is just also briefly mentioned is celebrity consciousness. So one of the things that happened when Rollo Haynes lost his job in the research and development, he was going to go into celebrity consciousness, but he found that the regulation was too strict, and that's when he went into the direction he did with Clayton and making his consciousness and the attraction that he made at Black Museum. Right. There's a Vox article about Amy Winehouse's postmortem tour and the life cycle of celebrity holograms. We'll link that in the description below. So if you recall, there are two really famous celebrities that took the stage after their death. I'm going to give you a chance to guess one of them.
Took the stage as in like
they performed
hologram on.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, jeez.
I'll give you a guess.
Prince?
No, actually, Prince said he would not allow a hologram of his life. I was trying to find like an exact quote, but someone asked him if he had the opportunity to perform with a hologram of Duke Ellington. He would not, because if he was meant to perform with Duke Ellington, they would have lived at the same time, and to do so would be demonic, and he's not a demon.
Wow.
Yep.
Go Prince.
Go Prince. Here's a clue. Hee hee.
Oh, it was Michael Jackson. Okay, good clue. Wow.
Thank you. So he performed at the 2014 Billboard Music Awards, and the other celebrity was Tupac, who took the stage 15 years after his death in Coachella.
Wow.
Yes. So there's actually a Black Mirror episode that returns to this concept in season 5, episode 3, entitled Rachel, Jack, and Ashley 2. You might have heard of this episode because it has Miley Cyrus in it.
Yeah, this is the one that like they use as their branding for everything because they're like, look, somebody super famous is in the episode. I actually haven't seen that one yet either, though. It's
a good follow-up to this one, I think. But the trick that's being used, and the Vox article goes into it really well. There's a couple of different companies that are using a technology that's based on an illusion called Pepper's Ghost. So the way that this technique works, like if you've seen the Haunted Mansion attraction at Disneyland in California, or if you've been to Coachella in 2012, then you've seen the technique in action. So here's an image of it. So as you can see in the picture, Pepper's Ghost is basically just a trick with glass and reflecting light, and it looks really amazing. It looks like you have a 3D image on the screen. And we'll also link to a couple videos of that as well in the description below. So this idea of having post-mortem celebrity performances, like Amy Winehouse's father is a part of her estate, and he's the one that's like, this is what she would want. Is it really? Did she really have that conversation with you about this? So this is now something that celebrities have to think about.
Wow.
Do I want my consciousness performing well after my demise?
Dang. Or whatever consciousness means in the form right now. In the future, it might be something different, I guess. But.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there's a lot to think about from this really very interesting episode. But that sums up our History Month special.
We hope this gives you all something to think about.
And as usual, at the end of every episode, we have a trivia question for you based on our sci-fi analysis. If you think you know the answer, send it to our Twitter handle here below. And the first person to get the answer will be included in our shout out on our next episode. So today's trivia question is, in Letitia Wright's portrayal of Shuri in Black Panther, what popular sci-fi film did she give a nod to? Think about it. Now, if you like this content, feel free to click on the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell button. Just click all the buttons except for the dislike, unless you disliked it and you're hate watching right now. Bless your heart, that's okay. Either way,
we don't judge.
No.
But either way, we will see you next time on
Sci-Fi in Real Life. Good night and good luck, humanity. You want to turn the lights on?
Yes, that is a good point.
Gotta get those specular highlights.
Oh, yeah. hair is just like sticking to me.
Oh no. Okay. All right.
Okay.
3, 2, 1. Hey.
Yep.
All right. 3, 2, 1.